Coming up in this video, spiritual ethics in mediumship development. We're going to be talking about the bargaining stage of grief. Training video dealing with grief and loss as a medium like a pro. You can find the full playlist link down below. If you are just getting to know us.
I'm Heather.
And I'm David.
From ZenRoseGarden.com. For all our Zen heads in Zen Ed Academy, let us know you're here with the hashtag ZenHead for life.
Absolutely. If you're watching live, give us a hashtag live tribe.
And if you're watching on the replay, give us a hashtag replay fam. Today, we're going to talk about that fourth stage of grief. And this is the most subtle and the trickiest to navigate. This is the bargaining stage.
Yes, but we want to know, if you've lost somebody, how much did you kick your own ass for all of the what ifs?
Because the what ifs are what the bargaining stage is sort of about in a nutshell, but bargaining can unfold in many different ways for years after a death. It's kind of the hardest to spot, as it is kind of the most tied into our personal shame, regret, guilt, and even our personal sense of justice, which is the need to set things right, and the frustration that comes from not being able to change the past. So it's a minefield, the bargaining stage.
It's a minefield and a mind fuck.
Yeah.
All right. So because it is so tied to guilt and shame, people are more likely to not talk about it or to even recognize that it is actually a normal part of the grieving process. And so they hold on to it as if, somehow by holding on tighter, they can change the past.
And this is the part that we see clients year after year holding on to the most, because it's the hardest to spot and the hardest to let go of. But we want to throw at you a few ways that bargaining can show up and how to recognize if a client is going through it, because I think sometimes we don't even recognize it.
So one of the biggest ways is questioning whether or not they did enough for their loved one when they were here.
Right. I mean, and that's common. And
coulda, woulda, shoulda, right?
It's okay that you're asking the questions because it is part of the process. So regret, I wish I had done ... right?
I always wish I had ... it.
No,
I don't. And then guilt and a whole range of what ifs.
What ifs?
Why did this have to happen? If only I had been there, it never would have happened, right? Why didn't I call more often?
Why didn't I visit more often? And these are the questions that plague us. And these are the normal questions that we ask in the bargaining stage. So very first thing I want you to remember is to know that it will happen.
You can't really avoid it because it is a sneaky beast, right?
The brain is going over the things it could have done better. That's what the brain does. So look at it this way. The mind is running a diagnostic to review and improve what can be done better next time.
It's a natural diagnostic part of the brain. Your mind is trying to find ways to prevent what has happened from happening again, right?
And there are just emotions attached to it, right? So emotions are attached to the process, so it can get sticky.
Yeah, and Victoria brings up a really good one. She says, she didn't love me enough to stay.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a really good one when it comes, and that fits perfectly in the bargaining phase.
And that can fall in the bargaining and the anger too, right? So this is why it's a sticky.
So there are just emotions attached to the process, and it can definitely get sticky. You're going to step in the poop. Just make sure that you have a rag handy to wipe it off, let go, and move forward.
Throw the rag in the trash, because it will happen. You're going to ask the questions. So while there is this urge that rises up to guilt trip yourself, you may also find yourself blaming other people.
Right. Okay? And this blame can be projected onto others if it gets too painful for you to look at it yourself.
Right. And so when this comes up, it can be a shit show that sometimes lasts for years, especially if there's already family dysfunction in the mix.
Right. And this is where in families, it can do with having a little more grace with each other. Realize that you're all in a grieving process, especially with the family, and they're going to show up as dysfunctional as they might be, or they're going to show up as authentic as they possibly can be.
Right. So this is where families can do with having a little bit more grace with each other, a little bit more patience, because you're all in the shit show together.
Yeah.
And the stuff's going to come up. So it's sort of like let's have a no harm, no foul period during that time period.
Yeah. And typically I'd say it's about 6 months to a year to go through the process fully and completely when you're aware of the process.
Victoria's is saying resentment, she didn't love me enough to stay. She owes me 50 more years. These are all part of the bargaining
and anger. Yeah.
I mean, those are bargaining and anger.
And Victoria's, take a look at the rest of the playlist down below after you're done with this video, because there's more on those other pieces and parts. I don't know if you caught those ones yet.
Many people hold on to this stage of grief for years, sometimes either in the form of self-blame or blaming others.
And sometimes even maybe blaming the person who's already passed over.
Right.
So at the end of the day, before you get to acceptance, right?
Before you can get to acceptance.
Yes, absolutely. You have to have a pencils down moment.
Right.
And that moment, it is what it is, right? There is no changing death. You cannot rewind the clock and make it happen in some other way, because that's just not the way that it played out. And at some point, the bargaining must be let go in order to fully heal. You cannot get to acceptance until you get through the process of, okay, I've done enough kicking my own ass. I've done enough kicking everybody else's ass. I'm just ready to be done.
Yeah. And it really, I mean,
with the process, not life.
Raise your hand if you have experienced this for subtly popping in for years at a time. I know David did when his brother Andy died.
For me, it was like 10 years, but I didn't understand the grief process.
It's the hardest stage to understand is the bargaining process, because it is the hardest to let go, especially if we already have a pattern of kicking our own ass. Then it's just at home when it shows up, and it's like, I'm just going to settle in and hang out for like 20 years. So at this stage of the grief process, the knowing that it was their time to go in a healing way can begin to take root in a more peaceful way in the mind of the bereaved, as opposed to somebody telling them this in the denial shock stage. Because remember, we talked about in an earlier video, when you tell someone who's in that denial shock
and they're
stage,
not ready for it.
Oh, it was just their time to go. That's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
You're going to get to it on your own if you get through the stages of grief.
And I want to clarify here. It was their time to go should be the grievers getting to it, not anybody else ever telling them that it was their time to go. They will get to it on their own. You do not have to push them into this part of the process, okay? But getting them through the process, being those ears and being willing to just sit and listen, that's the biggest thing that you can do. And if you need more on that one, go watch the playlist.
And here's the thing about it was their time to go. I know we've all said it to someone. And I think when you're in the middle of a grieving process with someone and you're also grieving, I see people saying that with each other, but they're both in it together. And that seems to be a little bit more acceptable. When you're not part of the inner grieving circle and you say that as not a bereaved person to a bereaved person, that's when it gets tricky in the shock denial stage. So the brain will get to that on its own if it can go through the bargaining stage.
So if a person can release the woulda, coulda, shouldas, they will generally get to the it was their time to go stage on their own. Okay? Again, you do not have to put them in that process.
Yeah, that's the important thing to understand, is if you can get through that and finally pencils down, then you will get to that peaceful place.
Right.
So,
and Denise says, I had a lot of survival guilt when my boyfriend died in a car accident, and I went through a lot of what ifs. Yes, absolutely.
That is the bargaining stage. How long did you go through that? Just out of curiosity, how long did that bargaining stage last for you? And is it still happening?
Yeah. Or do you find that it comes up in maybe moments?
Right.
Okay. Because for me, these things will come up in moments, even though on the majority, my foundation is pretty good. But every once in a while, some little other cycle of the process comes up and I go through it and then I'm done with it faster and get back to building that relationship with my brother where he is now.
Well, and sometimes, you know,
my mom.
Let me know if you can relate. Sometimes you think you're through that grieving process and another layer comes up. Oh, I'm fine, but it's not linear. During this last week with my dad's passing, I woke up with this, like the feeling that you have the day after someone's passed and you're like, they're not here. I didn't have that when he first passed. It sort of happened like 3 months later. So recognize that it comes up when it wants to, but then just process that. Yeah. So I think it's important, as always, to keep a finger on the pulse of where your client is. Right. And that can help you stay aware of those subtle nuances of how the bargaining stage is showing up. Because if you know the roadmap and you can recognize their regret, all of those things that you guys are talking about, resentment, you will be able to see those hidden places, those hidden pieces where the client is holding the pain.
Or another layer of the pain or another level of the pain.
And then you can kind of acknowledge it within your client if you're a healing arts professional, like maybe spiritual counseling, and kind of bring it to light that, that's natural, that's normal, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing to feel ashamed of or guilty of.
And we know that this is it's a very intense topic, okay? But we wanted to bring it up to the surface because most people in the healing arts world don't necessarily have this particular skill set. So this is especially when you're doing message medium, right? Message mediumship. It's a very big part of the process because you're dealing with the grieving process as a medium.
Most people don't feel the need to go have a healing session or a mediumship, or if they're not in some kind of grief process.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean someone just passed away last week. It can mean they passed away years ago and you're still trying to release those pieces. So if you are a message medium, for instance, guidance and messages from spirit, loved ones can be really different in different stages. And in the bargaining stage, loved ones might deliver messages of release, forgiveness, allowance, to help that bargaining process from deepening into stubborn, misplaced guilt and hidden shame.
Right. And knowing the roadmap and following the energy in a loving and compassionate way is the best way for you to get through it and to help your clients get through it.
Well, and to help yourself release some of those layers yourself, because we're people too, right?
We might be people.
We're not magic 8 balls or
right.
perfect,
Denise says many years, at least 10, getting better though. Absolutely. And it, like I said, it goes in cycles. So don't kick your ass for not being through it already. Just process the pieces as they come in. Yeah. My brother, to this day, I still don't know if it was suicide or homicide, but my brother went through that process. I went through that process, and I'm never going to get those answers. But I'm in a place in my life, I don't need those answers because I've created a relationship with him where he is now, because I've processed through those heavy things that were static on the line and preventing the communication from being more authentic and fluid. On the other side, once they've transitioned, once they've crossed over, there's not a lot of heaviness from their perspective. Okay. Most of that heaviness and the static on the line, and that what is preventing you from creating a new relationship with them where they are now, all of that heaviness is what's getting in the way of that genuine communication with your loved one. Victoria says, I would have died for her. Yes, absolutely. And that's, again, like Denise was talking about, that's a form of survivor skill.
Well, also that's another way that the bargaining stage comes up is the why not me?
Yes.
I would take especially if it's a child or someone that they're just not going at the right time,
Right. Take me instead.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely a bargaining stage statement. So knowing that that's normal, that's natural. That's what we do when we love someone.
Yeah. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today.
We'll be back to chop it up with our hashtag YouTube fam faster than 2 shakes of a unicorn's tail after he's pooped rainbow frosting on your carpet.
Check out the link below for Xanadu Academy. If you like this video, hit that like button.
Let us know in the comments below what would help you.
For more live hangouts, behind the scenes secrets, and mind hacking pro tips,
be sure to subscribe
and click that bell to turn notifications on
so you're the first to know
when we drop a new video. We know that time is a valuable and precious resource, and the fact that you guys have chosen to spend that with us, we absolutely honor and appreciate that. But most importantly, that you're here to take your life and your skills to a completely new level. We honor that even more. I want to thank you all for watching. We will see you in the next video over here or over here. All right.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Peace.